What's up, guys? My name is Joseph, and today we are going to be reviewing The Monkey by Osgood Perkins. Right off the bat, if you just want to know if you should see this movie but don't want to know anything else, it's a very easy yes. This is a super satisfying horror comedy that takes its concept to the extremes, really gets creative with a lot of its more colorful scenes, I guess. It's very funny, it's very simple, it's just a good time. But for now, we're going to hop into the non-spoiler review just to give a little bit more context for this movie before we hop into the full in-depth spoiler review. This movie follows two brothers, twins, who live with their mom and have an absent father, but they're very affluent because their dad is wealthy and just travels, basically, I guess traveling the world, getting with different people was what I took away from it. And he'll basically send gifts and trinkets home to the boys as his way of trying to be present in their lives. And one of the things that he eventually gifts them is this toy monkey. And pretty quickly, once it arrives, some bizarre, absolutely unexplainable 1 in a million deaths start happening. This movie doesn't really waste its time getting creative and getting gory, and it's very heavily focused on this gore aspect. A lot of the comedy and a lot of the visual language of this film is kind of built around the deaths, and it's really fun because you can kind of tell when one is coming, and you can see these different elements that are getting set up. And at least in the theater I was in, it was a lot of fun because it was pretty packed, and you could tell the room kind of getting ready for another death to happen, people holding their breath. And so that structuring of the movie was a lot of fun, to just kind of have these scenes where you start piecing together what might happen, but you don't know exactly what's going to be the thing that sets it all off. In terms of the story, it's very simple. I would honestly say that's probably the weakest part of the movie. I know it's based off of a short story adaptation from Stephen King, and I think that you can maybe kind of tell that the movie was struggling to get to a feature-length runtime. There were some things that just felt a little bit stilted and a little bit tonally inconsistent, I would say, and it's not the worst thing because the movie plays to its strengths very well, and since it's kind of a genre blend, it makes sense that there would be moments of kind of dissonance, I guess, where scenes don't necessarily play off one another very well, but it was still something that I noticed at least a few times. Never took me out fully, but I was noticing that certain emotional beats or ways of revealing information didn't really work for me, but it wasn't the biggest deal. Otherwise, in terms of story, it got a little bit it was a little confusing. I basically just had to shut my brain off, which I was fine and okay to do for this movie because it was giving me what I wanted in a film like this. But it also was not the tightest, most cohesive script. Some stuff was very expositional, and then some stuff was just kind of confusing, I guess. There were a lot of moments that I noticed I was confused as to what was happening or what I was supposed to be waiting to happen, and I wasn't exactly sure why characters reacted specifically in the ways that they did, other than the story required it. So I would say that was a little bit disappointing maybe, but I also was never bored, and it did not detract per se from my experience. It just didn't add anything, because as I said, I kind of accepted that I was okay, I probably won't get anything out of it in this regard, so let me just not even look for anything there. Performances are pretty good. I really, really liked Theo James as the main character, Hal Shelburne, and the other big standouts for me personally were... Oh, hey, Rhea.
Hey!
Want to say hi to the people?
I got 3 Whataburger, 3
Let me get a thumbnail moment.
Arthur brought home 100. And there's free Cluckers too.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay, we'd be eating good soon.
Hey.
The other big standouts for me in terms of performances were Colin O'Brien, who played Petey, the son of the grown-up version of Hal. I just thought he was nailing the tone of the comedy of this kind of straight man, kind of chill, reserved responses to these crazy scenarios, very much nonchalant, I guess. But then when he does express emotion, it's always more impactful because of his generally laid back demeanor. Anyways, I just thought he did a great job. And then also I really liked the performances of the 2 kids. I didn't even realize this. It's the same actor who played both young children. I knew that Theo James played both adults, but Christian Convery, well, damn, he did even, then, you know what, shit. I mean, dang, he did amazing. But, I mean, just his ability to play both characters is very impressive then, because I thought his depiction of Bill was like a great, like, snarky, like, douchey, like, asshole little kid who's a pain in the ass and full of himself, and then the other kid being super reserved and, like, basically, like, submissive, like, just letting himself get walked over. I guess the last thing I'll say for the non-spoiler is I really, really liked all the side characters as well. Both performance and, like, writing all added a lot to this movie. Like, every time there was, like, a side character, it was, like, a consistent, like, oh, I'm definitely gonna laugh multiple times during this scene. With that, though, I feel like I've said just about everything I can say before jumping into spoilers. So if you haven't seen this movie and you feel like you might want to go see it, then definitely check it out. But if you don't care about spoilers, or if you have seen it and are still interested in what I thought, then keep on watching. All right, spoiler review. To start off, I guess I'll just jump into probably the most buzzy part of this film, like the part that you really want to talk about the most, which is those insane death scenes. That was so much fun, you guys. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to, like, praise a movie that doesn't, like, because it didn't, like, completely, like, knock my socks off and do things I'd never seen before, but it was really, really clever and creative and, like, funny. Like, the deaths were funny. Like, in a horror comedy, if you can make most or all of the deaths really funny and gory and like, live in that space, then you're just in really good territory to have a satisfying, enjoyable watch. And it was, like I said earlier, those moments where you can tell a death is coming and you see all the pieces getting into place. There's the one where she, like, goes down into the basement. There's all the, like, tropes. The lights are flickering off and they power down, and, like, the creaky floorboards, and, like, she falls through the stairs into, I guess, a giant box of fishing hooks. I don't know. I don't want to just, like, summarize it, but it's like these moments where you just, like, see everything coming into place. Like, they really, really worked, and they're not, like, shy or embarrassed about, like, kind of hamming it up and being very campy with their editing and with their cutting and being so obvious. Like, they're not trying to seem subtle. They're being very bombastic, and they're, like, enjoying and living and, like, frolicking in this space of, like, anticipation of a comical death. Okay, actually, I do kind of, like, want to walk through the steps of the one where it's like, okay, so she falls through the stairs into a giant box of fishing hooks, and then she gets her face caught on fire and starts making a black streak of ash across the roof, runs outside. There's something in front of her steps, a pail, I guess, and she steps in it perfectly, and then runs and trips down this hill until she impales her entire face onto a fence post. And it's just this, like, several minute long sequence of just, like, super exaggerated and, like, melodramatic, like, screaming and acting and flailing around, and why is this character making the choices they're making? It's very campy and it's very fun. And then also, yeah, like, the side characters were hilarious. The one, I guess, like, priest dude in the church who, like, walks up to do the sermon for the funeral and is just like, and just the way he keeps on, like, digging himself into holes, like, talking about how her head is a separate issue, or just being generally insensitive and kind of ignorant and inflammatory and, like, unholy. There was a very consistent tone throughout this movie, a very unserious tone from the very beginning. Like, the mom telling the children about how everyone dies and just continuing to, like, nail that point home, like, everyone dies, I'll die, you'll both die, some people die horrible deaths. Or, like, the sleaziness of his uncle talking about, like, you know, we'll do our best to take care of you kids now that your mom is gone. It'll still be pretty bad, but... Or, like, telling this, like, 11-year-old child that you're, like, swingers and expecting him to know what that means. Or Elijah Wood's character, who I'm honestly... I don't even know... I think his thing was that he was a professional dad, I want to say. He was, like... He, like, sold books on, like, being the best dad ever. That's one of those things, though, again, where, like, the story was, like, kind of confusing, and I was like, okay, sure. He's a good dad, and that's his job, and, like, he gets to brag about it to this guy who doesn't get to have his child. I'm kind of jumping around here. I'm sorry. This is whenever I do these reviews, I always just do, like, no script. Like, I just saw the movie, like, an hour ago, so I'm just kind of, like, running through everything I've thought while I was watching the movie. I guess theme. I always like to touch on theme, because this is a channel that talks about movies, but more so wants to talk about how we can, I guess, be better people, improve our lives, motivate ourselves, focus on the right things. I don't know. So theme is something that's always very important And it's something that whenever I create stories is the main thing that I try to center everything else around, basically. So I guess let's give this movie a little bit of attention in that regard. I guess the two main things this movie is like mostly focusing on is like generational trauma and then existentialism. I don't know, I guess the generational trauma one, it didn't do anything for me. It wasn't bad, it didn't like fail, but it was like, okay, this is a movie that's like trying to say something about like the like negative impact we can have on our children when we have this baggage, I guess. I guess it's like scary for the parents because they really don't want to hurt their kids, but it's scary for the kids because they don't want to feel distance from their parents, especially distance that's ambiguous, that has no reason, because then it just leaves open this space for you to think it's about you, basically, or to imagine what it could be, which is a very scary thing. And that was something that the movie focused on, and like, you know, it succeeded. Again, it really helped that Colin O'Brien, who played Petey, like did really well, hitting both his comedic but also his emotional like beats. But honestly, the theme that I liked a lot more was this idea of like existentialism, of like not having an answer for why things happen. And I honestly thought this was a fantastic story to kind of explore that idea a little bit. I don't really know if this was a main theme in the short story that Stephen King wrote, or if it was more for this movie, or where exactly it stems from. But I love the idea of having this story that's about like these absurd, completely over the top extra deaths that just leave you asking all these questions like, why this person? Why does this monkey turning the key make someone die? How do you know? Like, are there rules? Why did they die in this way? Like, is there anything? And then you sit back and you think, well, when anyone dies, you can ask any of these questions. There's always this feeling of confusion and disbelief and denial and, you know, like distance, I guess, and just like everything hitting you like a wave and it seeming like something that shouldn't be possible. Like, it's those same feelings. And so it's kind of fun to, even though it doesn't necessarily say the most, to kind of like see a story that's just like seeing characters have to witness these gruesome, gory, vibrant deaths over and over, and eventually just have to come to the conclusion of like, well, yeah, I guess I've been told people die, and this isn't going to change, because they can never find a way to get rid of the monkey. By the end, they just keep it. They just have the monkey around. So it's this thing that, yeah, you can't get rid of it. You have to live every day knowing that you could die, anyone could die in any way. And in that regard, I honestly was like, bravo. Like, that was very well done. That was a great vessel to have that idea relayed. Oh, another thing this movie does well is like callbacks, and one of those that was really good was like at the very end of the film, I loved when like the literal like horseman of the apocalypse waltzes across like the road, and like they're basically just at this point where they've seen everything. They know that they're cursed and that there's this monkey and that it's killing everyone, and it just walks by and kind of acknowledges them, and I was like kind of chuckling the entire time. It's just this very slow, drawn out, like seeing the acceptance on their faces basically was really good. And then the bit right after that where like, which was set up earlier with the cheerleaders, like once like there's kind of this part in the movie with this montage of deaths, like some dude get his face blown off by steam, I guess, and some dude gets trampled by like 67 wild horses and he looks like cranberries or whatever they said. But there's like these cheerleaders who are like outside the house of the new death, like, yeah, like they're bringing out the body, which was really funny. And at the very end of the movie, they're like all on the bus, like cheering as like the apocalypse is happening and there's explosions and fire. And then like, of course, a semi truck comes by and wipes all their heads off. And like, that was the last joke in the movie, the last shot. And that was just like a great way to end it. Gosh, what else? I guess I don't want to just like go through and like highlight and summarize all the deaths, but they were great, weren't they, guys? Comment your favorite death down below. Like, honestly, there's so many great ones to pick from. Wasp laser, wasp beam death, fishhook fire pail fence post death, random shotgun in a closet death. That was another great side character. She was hilarious. Her like undying willingness to give someone a card despite them clearly not being interested in there being more important things, and her like wild smiles and hints and flattery with him. What were some other deaths that were really good? The very first one with what's-his-face, where the guy gets like harpooned and then like the intestines all like shoot out of him. That was hilarious. That's when I knew that this movie was going to hit the spot. It wasn't going to miss the mark. It wasn't going to like fall short. Because it wasn't just the guy gets harpooned and then it's like, oh, he got harpooned, like the monkey led to the harpoon. It was like he gets harpooned, the harpoon gets pulled back, and his entire intestines get pulled out. And it's like, okay, that's like so extra and absurd, like that's really good. And then of course that guy goes out with a flamethrower and shoots the monkey with a flamethrower for several minutes, and then we cut into a freeze frame of like narration of like the son basically being like, well, that's my dad. There was Rube Goldberg machine bowling ball cannon death. That one was kind of mid, I won't lie. As like a final kill of the main antagonist, that was kind of mid. Oh, but then the one like right after when the apocalypse starts happening, that was another really good callback where one person falls out of the sky from a skydiving accident, and it's like, oh, okay, that's like, like crazy death. Like, no way, there was a skydiving accident. And then immediately 2 seconds later, there's a second one. And you're like, oh, wait, that's good. Like, another one, like, that's crazy. But then as soon as that happened, I remembered a joke from earlier in the movie where they had a, like, skydiving company on their brochure say that they did weddings. And I'm like, in 2 seconds, I know a wedding dress is about to fall from the sky. And sure enough, it happened. And I laughed so hard. What else can I say about this movie? I guess I never really loved narration. That's just kind of one of those unwritten rules that you try to avoid unless you're doing something like a storybook or a fable. It kind of bothered me just that it was so expositional. Like, if it needed to just dump a whole bunch of stuff on you or completely switch gears and dive into a different plot point, it basically gave itself the conceit that, well, if we need to do anything too jarring, we'll just cut to a freeze frame and have the main actor say something like self-referential basically and be like, all right, well, to talk about this. And it wasn't like super annoying, but it was, I guess, I don't know, it was just something that they did that I noticed. I guess in general it was, again, like a little expositional, but also I remember that being something that I thought was kind of funny about it. Even seeing the trailer for this movie, the line that sold me on it, besides for saying that it was by Osgood Perkins, oh, that's something I'll talk about next. But besides seeing that it was directed by him, the line from the trailer where Theo James goes, "Brother, the monkey who likes killing our family is back." Immediately when I heard that, I already thought that the movie looked kind of bad at that point. I was like, this looks gimmicky and stupid. I thought it was going to be like what was that one like terrible like teddy bear horror movie, Imaginary or whatever? But once I heard that line, I was like, wait, that's too bad to be trying to be good. This movie's trying to be stupid and like campy. And from then I was sold and knew that I needed to see this, and I'm glad to say that that was consistent after watching. But no, yeah, I want to talk a little bit about Osgood Perkins. Obviously he was the director of Long Legs from last year. That movie made it into the honorable mentions in my top 20 video I put out around a month ago. But I really liked Long Legs. I thought that it was a super impressive like modern horror film. It didn't do anything groundbreaking necessarily, but it was just very effective. It had a good sense of like cinematography and atmosphere and how it could create suspense without just relying on jump scares and like loud noises. And it was at least trying to have a very interesting and layered plot with like actual emotional characters and like some heart and some interesting twists. It didn't necessarily stick the landing on everything, but like I was very impressed with it. And so I was excited to see this one. And I'm so happy to say that like Osgood Perkins is a director that can do multiple different kinds of projects. I mean, obviously this is still a horror film, but this is a completely different like style of movie than Long Legs, which was like fully trying to get you to delve into this scary world and make you, well, scared. But this one is like, this is much more of a comedy. There were maybe like 2 or 3 moments throughout the entire film where I was ever even a little bit like, wait, is something about to happen? It's almost entirely living in that more comedic tone. And beyond being a horror comedy, this is like, I don't know if this is a specific genre, because it's not like body horror, but it's like so excessively gory and like comedically gory. Like it stands out in that regard of like, that is like a directorial choice where they like decided like, nah, we're gonna fully like go for it and just like choose maybe to alienate some people with this choice, but to just like really land with others. And fortunately I thought it was like hilarious, like when an entire human leg blows by Theo James's character and he just kind of like, whoa. I'm no actor, so I can't do justice, but like it just really worked on me. So I'm very glad that like this is a new director that every time they have a new movie, I'm going to want to go see it. It's just super exciting to like kind of build out that roster, I guess. So yeah, and I guess in that regard too, if you're interested in like new filmmakers, people that are like currently active and have just kind of started getting more notoriety, this is another movie that I would say go watch, because that director is someone who I think is going to be notable for years to come now. But honestly, the more that I'm thinking, the more I feel like I've said mostly everything that I want to say about this movie. Like I said, it was very effective. It was super funny. Not scary, but that isn't really a detractor because this isn't a very serious movie, to be honest. It's a good time. Like, I can almost promise that if you go, you won't be disappointed. And for those reasons, and for supporting, lower budget movies, this isn't like some huge major like studio movie, I would say definitely go check this one out. But with that, I think I'm going to end this video. Stay tuned for a Clerks Micro Budget Mondays come out hopefully this Monday, as well as an Oscars video on Friday and a Mickey 17 review the week after that. Thank you guys for watching. See you later.